cat stopped in the middle of the path and then it stared straight at me. I was terrified. It'll bring a tear to my eye thinking about it, just my emotion that I felt that day.
I just froze. Didn't want to move because I didn't want it coming towards me or anything. Something like that. You think, where the hell has that come from?
Welcome to Big Cat Conversations. We speak directly to people who've encountered one of Britain's big cats. We also discuss the bigger picture. I'm Rick Minter, and thanks for joining me. Hello and welcome to episode 103 of Big Cat Conversations. For this episode we are speaking with Sue, and she is in the western part of Essex. In fact, it's a location just on the edge of Greater London, just beyond residential areas at the start of open countryside. Sue manages some stables for various types of horses, and she and members of her family have had several experiences with one or more big cats over many years. This is a rare interview for me because we're talking about a location where I visited a few times, and it's helpful for me, of course, that I know the setting that Sue will be describing. So, Sue, you and I have been in touch for several years now. Great to include you on the podcast. Thanks for coming on, and how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much for having me, Rick. I hope everybody enjoys this.
Good stuff. And we were just saying, Sue, before we turn the mics on, what a windy day it is. In fact, we've had trouble with the signal, but let's hope we're okay. But so you've just got in from the stables and the horses have been a bit freaked out.
They're bouncing off the walls.
We're in this autumn gales and storms season, aren't we?
Yeah.
The perils of managing stables. And of course, we're going to hear all about that in a minute and some of your late night sagas that you've had. So if we go back to several years back now, the very first sighting you had, you weren't with the horses, you were driving along the lane outside, is that right?
That's right, yes. We'd left the yard late. One of the horses hadn't been very well, and it was actually about 2:30 in the morning. And as we were driving down the lane, I saw something come out of the bushes, and I've stopped the car, and it was a black cat. I mean, I laugh about it now, but at the time, my daughter was in the car. I just stopped the car dead, and it wasn't in any hurry. It just strolled out and just walked casually across the road in front of us and just disappeared into the bushes the other side. We just sat there. I sat there with my mouth open, and all I could say to my daughter was, "Did you see that?" We didn't really know what to say because, you don't expect to see a black cat walk out across the road in front of you. And then that was it all the way for the rest of the journey home. We were going over what we'd actually just witnessed.
Sue, when you say a black cat, what do you mean by a black cat? You don't mean a moggy like I've got a little black cat moggy.
No, not a domestic cat. No, this was a black panther. It was larger than a Labrador. The back end was higher than the front end. And the tail it just went on, and it had this great big curve in the back of the tail. I mean, it was beautiful. We were just speechless because we couldn't believe what we'd just witnessed. And as soon as I got home and I came in, my husband was still up, and I told him, and he actually laughed at me. And I said, "No, that is definitely what I saw." My daughter and I couldn't sleep. And there we were up all night, going on the internet, Googling big cat sightings. And in the morning, we were still discussing what we'd seen. And my husband, he laughed and he said, "Well, if that's what you think you saw, why don't you report it?" First of all, I thought, well, yeah, I'll report it. But who do you report it to? And I ended up phoning the wildlife centre at the local country park. And they actually said to me that they'd had sightings. People had gone in and put in their visitors book that they'd seen a large black cat.
Very interesting. How far away are they from you, Sue?
If you go to the end of the lane where I am and then go through the village, when you get to the top of the village, if you chuck a right, 400 yards down there, there's a country park.
Okay, so only about a mile from you.
Yes.
You didn't get scoffed at by them?
No, they've had people tell them, and and it's been put into a book that they've had sightings. When I said to the workman up at the stables, and obviously the chap that owns the land, what I'd seen, what they all actually thought I'd been drinking. And it was actually a standing joke for a while that, Sue's been on the juice. Nobody would believe us.
And of course, at that time, you didn't know the saga over many years that was ahead of you, which we're going to hear.
No.
So before that, yourself and your daughter, you hadn't heard of anybody talking about it in the locality?
No, nothing at all.
This one was not far from the stables, but it was walking across the lane as you drove that way in the evening, is that right?
Yes, it came out from these fields and bushes, and it just strolled out from the gap in the bushes and just walked casually across the road in front of us. I'm just annoyed that I didn't have a dash cam in the car. It turned its head, it looked at us, and it just carried on strolling. It wasn't in a hurry. It didn't stop, it just looked and just carried on going and just disappeared into the hedgerow, the other side, and across the fields. I had my full beam on. I would have thought that the full beam would have startled it, but no.
You were going slow enough not to risk hitting it?
Yeah, I always drive slowly down there because we have a problem with the deer just jumping out.
Yeah, well, we'll go on to the deer and the cats a bit later on. Well, normally we would spend longer analysing this particular sighting because it is interesting in its own right, but I know we've got so much else to talk about. We'll move on. Can I just say now, Sue, over all these cases that we're going to hear about, do you think it was that particular one that you first saw that's happened again and again and again on these cases, or are you not sure? Are you pretty certain there's been more than one in what's coming up?
There's been more than one, and there's also been different colours as well.
And at that point, your husband and son, they hadn't seen anything. Was it the next sighting, the next event, your son was involved?
Yes, the next event was was two of my sons. They were coming down to the stables to meet me up at the yard. And again, the cat strolled out in front of them and walked across the lane and disappeared into the bushes. And as soon as they came up to the yard, that was the first thing that they jumped out the car and they said, we've seen it. And because they just didn't believe what I told them. That was probably about 6 months after.
And they didn't have a dash cam either?
No.
Then did your husband start thinking, oh, right, my wife and 3 children have all claimed to see the Black Panther, it must be something?
No, he was still laughing, thinking that we'd made it up, and no.
He wasn't convinced. He still wasn't convinced.
No, he still wasn't convinced.
So what happens next? Do we move on to nighttime disturbances at the stables next? Over weeks and months, you had the horses getting bothered and spooked, and you were seeing eyes shine. Are those the sorts of things that were happening next?
Yeah. We had where the horses used to go down to the field. I used to bring them in of a night, and we had a large tree with a great big branch that used to go over the driveway, and it got of a night. You could always hear it creaking, but there was no light, so you couldn't see up the tree or anything. But this branch would always creak, and we'd have the horses rearing up, trying to spin round and bolt the other way. And we used to have terrible problems getting them up from the field with the tree. But then luckily a lorry drove down and took the branch out. But my daughter was convinced that it was up in the tree. And then before the big house was built, the place was really run down, and there's a pond and a lake over the back. My daughter used to see it sitting at the pond. You could see the eyes of a night, and she said the eyes were very distinctive. It wasn't at that pond, it'd be over the back where the stables are. If you look diagonally across, there's a big lake there. It'd be up by the lake.
She was seeing the silhouette and the eye shine, was she?
Yes, both. She'd jump into the car. So that's why we then put the lights up around the yard. there's all the lights up.
Yeah, it's a shame to have to do that because that probably disturbs the horses, actually. But, I mean, if it keeps the cat at bay a bit.
No, we had to put the lights up. And then we had the problem where I went round to the muck heap one night. The muck heap used to be round the back of the stables. It sounded like a woman being strangled.
You see, that's more the mountain lion on heat call, the sandy brown one, yet you were getting sightings of black. And you've had that several times, haven't you, over the years?
We have, yeah, but the first time it happened, my kids come running round to the muck heap because they actually thought I was being attacked round there.
Gosh.
But it actually sounded like a woman being strangled. It's such a high-pitched, blood-gurgling noise. It's a terrible noise.
Woman in distress, it's often categorised as.
Yes, terrible noise. Yeah, we've had that a few times. And then we had another incident where we went down to the yard. There'd been a power cut and there were no lights on. There was no lights down the lane, none at the stable yard. And I got out of the car to unlock because the stable gate is padlocked with a chain. And I got out to unlock, and as I was unlocking the gate, I had something growl at me, and it definitely wasn't a dog. And I turned round and I looked at my daughter. She was in the car. All I could say, well, what was that? And I've got her screaming at me to get into the car. And whatever it was, it flew off in the direction of the other end of the driveway, which is just bushes and trees. She spun the car around and we just got the back end of something disappearing into the bushes. But it definitely wasn't a cat, like a small domestic cat, and it definitely wasn't a dog.
And that was really close to you, obviously.
Yeah, it was. It was.
How was it affecting the horses at these early stages? Were you seeing their spooked and on-edge behaviour?
Very on edge. Horses are a flight animal, and all they seem to want to do is just literally spin round and run in the other direction.
Some of the evenings when your daughter was seeing it the other side of the big pond, were the horses were tucked up in the stables at that stage?
They were.
So they wouldn't have been picking that up so much?
No, not so much.
And presumably there were weeks and months where nothing happened because it wasn't around, but would you sense it was around because of the horse's behaviour sometimes?
Yes, yeah, the horses become very restless once settled in their stables. You have them box walking, just walking round and round. Not even, I mean, their hay nets will be hanging up. They won't even stand and eat their hay nets. They're just literally trashing the beds and walking around the box.
How was this affecting you and your daughter as managers of the horses? Both frustrated that the horses' welfare was a bit affected, but also that you were on edge because you had a big, large carnivore prowling about sometimes. Did it get to you? Did it affect you? Were you bothered and worried?
Yes, yeah. We went through a phase where we were just, we were locking the top doors of the stables. So the horses were literally completely shut in of a night. We had all the lights up. So obviously anything came onto the yard, the lights will come on. We didn't want lights on permanently because obviously, the horses don't want the bright lights. They want to be able to rest in their stables. But we were having to lock the doors.
I'm trying to remember, Sue, these early cases, they were over 10 years ago. Your first sighting and your son's sighting. When was that? Do you know what year it was?
It was actually about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I'd only just moved house, so it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, so we are talking about a period of time over 10 years. It's still going on, and we'll come to, obviously, the latest incidents towards the end. So then, am I right in saying the next series of events was the deer kills, the deer carcasses that you found, and then shortly after that I was called and I made, or my family made a visit, and then my daughter and other half Ellie made a visit, and then I followed. So tell us about the deer carcasses then.
Yes, I can't actually remember if it was 4 or 5 dead deer turned up, and as you saw, they've been eaten out. Some of them, there was just the marks on their throats.
This was in pastures about a field and a half away, about several hundred metres away from the stables, wasn't it?
That's right. the chap that I rent the land from, he asked me, he said, look, I've got a load of dead deer turned up, will you come down? So I went down to the field and he said to me, what do you think done this? And then he laughed and he said, do you think it's your friend? See, because it was a standing joke that I'd seen a black cat and they all thought I was completely off my head. So I said, yes, definitely. So he said, well, what do I do? I said, well, phone the police and get them to come down. So he phoned Essex Police. And first of all, they were sort of trying to pass it off, but they actually sent down a firearms unit, and they turned up. They were laughing and joking, saying that it was better, they were better off, coming down there instead of being stuck up at Southend. And then when they came down, when they came down and saw the deer, they weren't actually laughing. So they then called for forensics, and they stood down there while the forensics came down, and they did some tests and things down there, and they confirmed that the one that was eaten out, that they had been killed by a big cat. But while the forensics were carrying out their test, they're all standing there with their guns and everything.
It dawned on them it was a predator in the locality. Of course, it could have been 5 miles away at the time.
Yeah, and then obviously they just gave us a crime report number and said somebody would be down to remove the deer carcasses, which they did. They came and took them. But then we were getting worried because we had some foals that we'd bred. They'd belonged to the landowner. He has racehorses. And it was after it being confirmed, I said to him, I didn't think it would be safe for the foals to go out on the land. I spoke to somebody, this lady that actually gave me your name, and she told me of a incident that happened to her. She lives away from where we are, but a similar situation. Some neighbours of hers had bred a foal, and they thought the foal had been stolen. It disappeared overnight out the field. So there was no sign of it, and they ended up putting the mare in foal again to have another foal. And then the mare was attacked in a field. First of all, they thought some lunatic had been down to attack the mare. It was some years later, when they were actually clearing the land, they actually found the skeleton of the foal. And she said to me, we know that it was, a big cat that had done that. And she said to me, your best bet is to get in touch with a chap called Rick Minter. She said, but if you Google him, you might be able to find him, but he's the chap you need to speak to. And that's why then I ended up managing to get hold of yourself with regards to what was going on. Because everybody that you try to speak to, they either think you're a raving lunatic or you're going crackers, and big cats don't exist.
Unfortunately, there's no magic solution that I can bring, but we can do things like investigate the signs and deer kills and things and try and make a measured judgment about whether it is big cat related or not. And we can put up trail cameras, and we can advise about special lights that you can use called foxlights, which can distract predators, even foxes. Some people use foxlights, these sort of whirling, flashing lights for foxes, as well as trying to deter bigger predators like cats. So there's one or two things that we can advise on. I've now, of course, delegated the cameras to a local guy in Essex who comes sometimes because he's much closer, because I'm obviously quite a long way away. And all of these cases, of course, are learning from me. And I can pass on ideas and thoughts that other similar landowners might have elsewhere in similar situations. I followed up, and the woodland area next to this pasture where the deer carcasses were, it's a bit like a deer park, isn't it? It's huge, and they've got big fallow deer. I think you've got roe and fallow deer, both types of deer.
Yeah.
The deer carcasses you were getting, they were full-grown adults, weren't they? Really big.
They were.
The first day I came, you introduced me to your neighbours of the stables, because they had an eaten-out deer on their land, hadn't they? They hadn't seen anything, but they were suspicious and thought, this is so fresh and filleted out, it has to be something like a big cat. So it was good to meet them and see they had the same kind of thing going on.
Yes, but the girls that had their horses on their land, they had actually seen it. They used to go down and turn their horses out early in the mornings, and they said at 5:30 on quite a regular basis they used to see the cat down by the lake.
Yeah, interesting. Now, the cameras, I was quite hopeful of the cameras because they were in good places, and we eventually had about 5 out, but most of them got stolen, didn't they? I would come back every sort of 9 months or something, and obviously I would have come back, every 3 or 4 months had I been more local. But I think it's this type of place where there aren't many people about. There's a footpath right on the edge. You can tell hardly anybody uses it, but I think it's the type of place where the 1 or 2 odd people who do go there, some of them might be a bit light-fingered and wander a bit and trespass and nick things if they get the chance. I think that was what was happening, unfortunately. So frustrating. So we did lose some cameras, but we persevered. There are still some there that Paul has taken over from me. And it did slow down a bit, didn't it, Sue?
It did. It all became very quiet. We didn't have much in the way of activity. The neighbours spoke to them. They said no, they hadn't seen anything. And I think we had the incident with the horse that dropped down dead with like the claw marks on the stable gate.
Well, I think you did get one more case of the deer carcasses. So I was able to see them because I missed the first lot of deer carcasses, but I did see another lot. And it's almost like over a month, there was one a week. There were about 4 laid out at different stages, and it'd be the classic thing where over this month a cat had 1 a week, and you saw them. The freshest one was there, and the oldest one was there, and you think, gosh, this is a graveyard for the deer in the neighbouring woodland. But at that time, the cameras weren't. I think we only had 1 camera up, but the batteries had run out in that, and the others had been stolen. I was able to see the deer carcasses, which is helpful. So yeah, tell us about this unfortunate case of the dead horse.
He was 9 years old. The one that we lost, he was 9 years old, fit, healthy, nothing wrong with him. He'd not long had his jabs, and when the horses have their jabs, they get like an MOT from the vet where they check their heart and their lungs and everything, it was fine. We left them with the top doors open. We'd left them open overnight, and when we went down in the morning, he was dead. Dead with these like claw marks on the stable gate.
He was intact, wasn't he? Maybe the cat had jumped in and he'd had a heart attack or something like that.
Either that, or he was actually. It was like winter time. We had a lot of hay that was being delivered, and it was in the February, and instead of the yard being clear, there was lots of like shadows and obstacles, so ideal for something to be hiding behind. And yeah, I think he's just literally, I don't know if it got into the stable, or because when I say his door was low, it was actually a Shetland pony stable at one point. I mean, he was the only horse that was docile enough that we could put in there with such a low gate. And I think it's frightened him, and he's had a heart attack.
Because it had got in but decided not to go for him, maybe because he was too big.
Yeah, but he'd actually run. The way that he died, he took the wall out of the stable, his back end. When we went down there in the morning, I went to the horse next to him first, and as I opened the stable gate, I got his head collar and opened the stable gate to take him out to the field, and the other horse, his back end, he'd gone through the brick wall, and he was like laying in half in his stable. So he'd literally gone to the furthest point that he could in the stable, and dropped down dead.
It's quite a traumatic event.
So yeah, so obviously he'd been frightened to have gone to that back corner. We'd left the doors open that night, because it had been It had been a bit stuffy and a couple of them had been coughing. The doors have been left open, but they're not left open anymore now. They're all locked in overnight. They've got bars, but nothing can get through the bars.
Okay, and you had recently at that time had a case where you thought the cat was close to you in the yard. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, again, just by the gates to the yard.
Did you get a good view of that one?
Yeah, that was black, that one. It was at the side, just on the grass at the side of the gates. Whether it was going to duck under the gate or go through the fence, I don't know.
And it was just there when you arrived in the car?
Yeah, and again, it just turned round, span round and shot off down the drive through into, because it's like a little wooded area at the end of the driveway, and shot through there again.
And do you think that was similar to the first one you saw years before?
Yes, definitely.
I think you were telling me the next morning that your daughter was furious with you for getting out of the car.
Yes, she was. She was. But the thing is, you forget sometimes. You forget that it's about. I know it sounds really daft, but yeah, you do. You forget it's about.
You've got to get on with sorting out the horses, that the reason you're there.
They've still got to be done, yeah. But the rule now is once it's dark, nobody goes to the stables or you don't go down the yard on your own. And once it's dark, you don't leave the stable yard, because we've got all the lights up now. There is no more going down the fields late of a night and in the dark to get the horses in. Well, they're not out there now.
By the way, at what stage did your husband turn into somebody who accepted what was going on, accepted that this was all real?
When we lost the horse and we had the claw marks on the door, he came down and he saw the marks on the door. There were actually some marks on the mat just inside the door, but we don't know if they were caused by the animal or the horse, or we don't know. But at that point, he then said, yeah, there's got to be something. A perfectly healthy horse doesn't just literally drop down dead. There wasn't a mark on the horse. I mean, yeah, a horse can have a heart attack. It can have like a bleed, but there will be signs of loss of blood, through the nose, and there was nothing. He had literally dropped down dead.
And had a traumatic experience by all the physical signs in the stable.
Yeah, and the fact that he'd gone to the back corner of the stable. I mean, it's taken some force for him to take some of the bricks out of the wall.
Yeah, so he must have panicked.
Yeah.
So even when the police forensics came, your husband wasn't persuaded?
No, not really.
Fair enough.
No, not really.
Even though you have police in the family too as well.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that he is persuaded now.
Oh, definitely now. And then after the last episode, 100%.
Which we'll come on to. So after the dead one, unfortunately, in the stables, did you have any sightings before you had the scratch marks on the flank of the horse?
No, nothing at all. That's why we'd started leaving the horses out, because we thought, it's gone, it's moved on.
A 2-year gap, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. There's been nothing. The lady next door, she's had no sightings, nothing's been seen down by her lake. We hadn't had any dead deer. We just thought it had moved on.
Yeah, so tell us about the markings on this horse. Again, this is a full-grown, mature horse that suddenly has really deep grooves in the flanks and is also really traumatised. Is that right?
Yes, she's 16 hands, fully grown, a lovely natured horse. We went down just to put the feed out for them in the field and to do their waters. And first of all, the horses were all standing huddled. We've got the gate, but right behind the gate, we've got the hedgerow, and the horses were all huddled over in the corner there, and they didn't want to come over. And they were just sort of all standing together, which they don't usually do. They're usually in like pairs, but they were all huddled together, very reluctant to come over. And then when they did finally come over and she turned around, my daughter said, "Oh my God, what has happened to her?" And I took one look at her and I was frantic because I'd just driven down to the field. I was going to leave the horses out. I grabbed a rope out of the car, got her up to the yard, and then I came back and a couple of other people helped me get the other three in, and we phoned for the vet. And as soon as I saw it, I thought, yeah, that's the cat. Claw marks both sides of her rump with a terrible tear. It was about 4.5 inches.
One of them was much more deeper and almost skewered.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Vet said it was about 4.5 inches deep. She said it was a really nasty pocket, terrible wound. The vet said it's definitely no dog has done that. First of all, she said no dog will jump onto the back end of a horse. And dog attacks on horses, it's usually their lower legs, the knees. She said she's never seen injuries like it. Yeah, nasty, really nasty. It must have happened overnight.
This was in the morning. This is the first check in the morning.
Yeah.
In the weeks that followed, that horse was super nervous of anybody coming up from behind.
She still is. You can't approach her from behind. She doesn't like the dark. We're having to leave the spare stable next to her, the lights on all the time, because the minute she's in darkness, that's it. She's just pacing the stable.
So she still hasn't got over it, poor thing.
No. You can't walk up behind her now. She doesn't like it. So very, very unsettled.
This was what? This was 6 months ago, wasn't it, that it happened?
June. It happened in June. Yeah, it was in June.
2023. Yeah, we're talking now in mid-November.
Yeah. And a £2,000 vet bill.
Gosh. And that was several visits, presumably, and a key thing would be just sort of bathing the wounds.
It was heavily infected. Yeah, she ended up on 3 lots of antibiotics. It's ever so strong. But yeah, it was the cleaning out of the wound. It was terrible. In actual fact, because obviously the vet doesn't come every day, one of my sons is a police officer. Well, 2 of them are, but he was actually coming down. I had his girlfriend coming down who's a paramedic. A neighbour of mine was coming down. She's a nurse to clean the wound because it was horrific.
Very good of them, and that would have helped. And of course, it saved on vet's bills as well.
Yeah.
All because you felt that the cat was away at last and there was no kind of prospect of this.
I thought it had moved on. And then I mentioned to the lady that lives at the back of me that I know that she has horses down the lane to me. I said to her, make sure you don't leave, because she's got a little Shetland, leave your pony out. I said, because my horse has been attacked and I'm convinced it's been attacked by a cat. And she said to me, a cat? So I said, yeah. So she said, well, when did it happen? I said, last week. And she said, are there actually cats loose? And I said, yes, yeah, I've seen them. And she said, only my brother told us last week that he had seen a mountain lion. I won't say the name of the road, but it's actually 2 lanes over from where I am. And he'd seen it at 5 o'clock in the morning on his way to work. It was walking along the side of the lane. So that was actually the same time that my horse was attacked.
If that was the same cat, that would be obviously a different one to the black panther that you'd been having as a visitor.
That's right. She said it was definitely, he said it was a sandy-coloured mountain lion. So she said, we've all been calling him a liar. She said, I'm going to go home now and ring him. That's why now I think, well, perhaps this time round it was the mountain lion, because it was put in the same area, it was seen the same time that my horse was attacked.
That's very coincidental, isn't it? How do you think it happened? Do you think it jumped from a tree, or is it impossible to know? It's all a lot of woodland edge, isn't there? The big oak trees with big side branches, aren't there?
There are actually some trees at the side of their field. Yeah, there are some trees. But whatever it is, it's obviously it's got on her back end. I wonder if it's tried to pull her down.
I mean, often they just go for the wrong target and then realise quite quickly that it's, far too big to cope with, and they sort of get off. But meanwhile, the horse has had a terrible time of it and very traumatised. If we can, we could put a couple of photos on the website so people can see the injuries to the horse, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine.
I know you got so exasperated at this time that you actually went on Facebook, didn't you? Well, we'll talk about your attitudes to the cats in a minute. Inevitably, you've had quite a time of it.
I was at my wit's end this time round, but my son's girlfriend, she came down the day that it happened because she held my horse, because obviously I had to shoot home to get paperwork and everything for the vet coming down. She waited at the yard and took some photos for me. But when she went back to her house and she mentioned to her groom that my horse had been attacked in the field by a big cat, her groom used to work in the premises opposite me, and she used to see two large cats out in their fields, but they were black, that she'd seen walking across the fields, and she said she used to see them on a regular basis.
There you are. We're talking about how many there are, and so there's two, and two black ones, plus a sandy brown mountain lion type. Going back to the horse injuries, I remember that I was getting people's views on them. It was interesting that I think because of this separate, deeper one that isn't like a rake mark, which the others are. Some of the others are classic rake marks that you get along the flank of a horse.
Yes.
Where the claws have grooved through. But I think because of that one that's deeper and different, some people were saying occasionally you get sick people who attack horses, which is correct. That does happen as well. And so I think some people were saying, oh, it could have been a human incident, which I don't agree with, because all the other circumstances are pointing to this, being a cat.
My sons, they deal with stab wounds, obviously with what they deal with at work. And both of them said it actually looked, and the nurse that came down, they all said it did look like a stab wound. It was so clean and so deep.
But they would have said the others weren't, though, wouldn't they?
That's right. And no horse is going to stand there while you've got a maniac with a knife and let them have 4, 5, 6 attempts before they can finally penetrate the knife that deeply into the horse. It just couldn't happen.
And that person would get kicked to pieces, of course, if they did.
That's right.
I think one of the explanations is that is where it went in deeper, that claw, because it was levering it, it was changing position, and it levered and changed its angle, and that's what skewered it deeper.
Yeah, and with the horse, obviously she's would have been bucking to get it off her back. I think what that lady said, the weight of the cat and that one claw, that would have torn the flesh and caused that injury.
Yes, because I copied some of my other contacts' views onto you, and I think one of them said that the change of the weight distribution makes that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a very good observation.
Some size, wasn't it? Because she said was it the weight of the cat you could probably determine by the depth of the wound, and that was like 4.5 inches deep, that wound.
It's often the toms that do it. In America, when the mountain lions go for feral horses, it is often the big toms that do it, and they often, the ones that get the knack for going for the horses, they often wait till the horses are on sort of rubbly ground where they can't get traction to move away quickly, which shows you how skilled the cats are. The one or two of them get the knack and just do it, but they tend to be big toms that are doing it.
Yeah, because the horses don't like ground like that. Because when mine are mucking about, if they're bucking and I'm trying to get them down the field, I actually walk them on the stones. They're hobbling because the stones, they find it uncomfortable with their feet.
And they can't sort of scoot off quickly.
No, they can't.
The big Tom mountain eyes, wait till they're corralled in those kind of situations and get them. But having said that, I know it is obviously very sad, and horses, of course, are so alert animals. They unfortunately know what's happening more than some prey animals and what's going to befall them. But there can be some real problems with land being overbrowsed and poached badly in cases where there are big numbers, big herds of those feral burros and horses in some of those western states in America.
Yeah.
You could argue that, some predator doing a bit of culling is perhaps part of the ecosystem, if you like.
Yeah.
Nature doing its thing. And so we'll come on to your attitudes, Sue. So the first time you saw one and you didn't know, crossing the road, you didn't know that they potentially could cause you trouble years on. You said it was beautiful. We've heard from witnesses on these podcasts who think they're enchanting and it's wonderful and it's a bit of rewilding for real. So presumably you get all that, but you're having hassle. So, and if people put themselves in your shoes, what would you like for people to understand how you feel about it? What would you like to say?
Well, it's costing me a lot of money. The horses are cooped up when they should be out in the fields. They can't be turned out. You're worrying all the time. I worry now, they have been going out, but if it had managed to have got her down, I wouldn't even have had a horse at all. It's just the worry.
I mean, it's changed her life. If she's months on, she's still fretting and nervous and traumatised.
She won't be in the dark, but she's always going to have the light on. She constantly box walks, very unsettled. It's a shame because she was really a very calm, placid, easygoing horse, and obviously it's not a very nice scar either. It's quite nasty.
The thing is, Sue, there's more than one, isn't there? That's the issue. You are living alongside, occasional visits from cats, and sometimes they keep away from the horses, and sometimes they get close, and the horses react, and it's not much fun for you or them. So it's a very difficult situation to manage, isn't it, and address? Because say you could dart and take away one of the cats, well, you don't know whether you get the offender. There's still others to come.
Yeah. And obviously it's costing us more money because whereas the horses would be out through the summer and the spring, with all the grass and that, they have to come in. It's like keeping the horses through the winter, 12 months of the year. It is expensive.
You presumably don't want to change the position of stables. You've got some land that suits your situation, your setup for the horses. And of course the landowner's got the racing horses as well as part of the setup.
Yeah. No, there's no foals or that, the foals are now kept in Ireland. He won't keep them. He won't keep them here. The grandchildren have Shetland ponies that only go out when we're there. And then once we leave the stables, they come in. They come in and they're shut up. And they have their top doors shut as soon as it's dusk. If it'll attack a large horse, what would it do to a small pony? The vet said to us, definitely not. A foal wouldn't stand a chance. Because, the vet originally said, a large horse will be fine. But, well, it's just proved us wrong. The large horse isn't fine. So, unfortunately, there's no more staying out in the field for the horses. They're in stabled overnight.
Yeah, and of course, the racehorses, the value of the thoroughbred racehorses is just awesome, isn't it? They're tens of thousands of pounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were incredible to witness up close. I'm not into horse racing, but to just see them.
Well, I think when you came down to do the cameras, do you remember when you came down to do the cameras and the horses all got out and I think they all went galloping past you? A couple of those were race horses.
Yeah, that was a great... I think I've mentioned that on the podcast before, on one of the episodes, that they actually came charging across. I stupidly hadn't realised. I was in the middle of their paddock and they were making the most of their freedom and they came charging at me and I thought, I'm going to be flattened and in hospital. And I just stood still and they, at the last second, they just parted and ignored me.
Yeah.
But they whistled past me. I thought, that was close. They would have just flattened me.
Yeah. Oh, I think at that time, that 4 of those that ran past you that day, they were all race horses.
Oh, they're impressive. Very impressive. Yeah. Oh, well, I think we all feel for you, Sue, for what's happening, because you can understand how people do admire the cats. can't you? But of course, if they're misbehaving around people like you, it's a different matter.
They're beautiful, but...
Not round you, they're not.
Yeah, we're having the building work done, and once it's finished and the paddocks are done, the horses probably won't even be going down the fields, because I've never had any real problems in my own paddocks. I've left them out of the night, and I've left the menage lights on and the stable lights on, and the horses actually have gone and slept in the menage under the spotlights on the carpet fibre. So that'll probably be the way forward. We don't use the bottom field because, we did have all the dead deer and everything else down there, but it just seems that the cat's creeping up nearer the top.
And the sad thing is that it's got woodland stuff full of deer, and there'll be rabbits all around as well. You could argue that for the majority of the time, you're not getting any hassle or trouble from the cat. It's just you never know when it's going to happen, and it can be a real impact when it does happen. That's the problem, isn't it? And so it's always on your mind, or potentially on your mind.
I think what also plays on my mind is the fact that, as you've seen, we have hundreds, and I mean literally hundreds of deer. Why would the cat decide to have a go at the horse?
Yeah, that's right.
Bizarre.
Does it frustrate you over all these years? So we've had a bit of bad luck with the cameras because we've had some stolen and we can't put them out as much as we'd like to for different reasons, but that we haven't got more and better evidence. We say this everywhere. It's a national issue, national challenge, but you are dead sure you are living alongside both black panther and mountain lions, visiting occasionally. Yet we can't get them on camera, we can't get their DNA, we can't get any real crucial evidence. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's annoying, but we will eventually. We had that on the camera, didn't we, where the deer were grazing and something black comes out of the woods, turns around and disappears back into the woods and disappears, and the deer all took off. It was out of vision. All you could make out was this something black coming out, but I'm convinced that was the cat.
Yeah, it just shows you've got to have perfect footage.
That's right.
And I think you're probably right, but it's not going to influence anybody, really.
No.
Just shows you how stealthy and elusive they are, as we know from this podcast. But
to be honest with you, when I'd gone through that footage from your cameras, because I used to go through it, didn't I? I even missed that. It was my son that had spotted that.
Because he's very alert, because he's in the police.
That's right, yeah. I missed it the first time, and I'm 100% that's what it was, but we will get it eventually. But they are really elusive. You're right. And sometimes, when it pops up and you see it, you're so taken back, your instincts aren't quick. Where's the camera? Where's the phone? Get a picture. You're just so taken back with what you're witnessing.
You'd have to have a body cam on, really, to have a chance, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Or a dash cam. I've got one now. I'm just waiting for it to come out.
Got a good chance, certainly, yeah, because you're driving that lane and nearby lanes either ends of the day, aren't you, when the cats could be out?
Yeah. And then, as I said to you, my farmer, I've just changed hay suppliers, and I was explaining, because he said to me, you're getting through a hell of a lot of hay. I said, no, this is what I get through. And I said to him, it's just getting worse now since the horse was attacked by a big cat. And he said to me that he'd witnessed, when he was out doing his harvest, a big black cat walking across his fields when he was out cutting the hay.
That's right, yes. That was a while back, wasn't it?
It was last summer.
Yeah, okay. And he's more into Essex countryside, away from the fringes of the conurbation, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
But just shows you, you wouldn't have known that unless you'd raised it. You've also, we get on the podcast and elsewhere in my networking on Big Cats, reports of people who are running scrap metal yards, or in the past have run scrap metal yards and have had them as guarding animals or trophy pets at those places. And you've heard a story like that, haven't you?
Yeah, there was actually a chap at the back of the land where I am, and he was a scrap metal merchant. and apparently he had a lynx and a panther. And when he died, they were let go. He didn't have the appropriate paperwork for them or anything. And when he died and the land was passed on, they were let go. That's not just hearsay, that's I've been told by very good authority now from a number of people. That land was at the back of where I am. Apparently the panther used to be on a chain outside his caravan. He passed on. And the crazy thing is, I was actually working somewhere, and a chap there was telling us that a member of his family had been questioned by the police about letting go a big cat. And he was like laughing and joking about it. So, how absurd and all the rest of it. But yeah, that was all to do with that scrap metal merge. So yeah, it was true.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's one of those places where I often call the fringes of towns and cities bandit country. All sorts of things goes on. The land, the land where the deer carcasses are, where the horses go beyond their main paddocks, it's like a savannah, isn't it? You look at it and you think, this may be on the edge of London, but it does look just perfect.
There's a little wooded area down there, because I remember when you asked me to go and look for some bones, see if I could get some bones so you could do some tests of them. And I remember this was when the World Cup was on, the football. And I was joking. I took a friend with me because I thought, I'm not walking down there on my own. Not now I know what's about. We were laughing and joking, We saw people are at home now watching the World Cup, and what are we doing? We're walking around here looking for bones.
Yeah.
And we found in amongst all those trees, it was like a little den, and the pile of bones in there. I have got the photograph somewhere. They were just piled up.
Another world, yeah, the graveyard situation.
Yeah, but the smell, the stench, it was horrendous.
Yeah, the cat, in a way, that it's so close to millions of people. But I think you said before that landowner had the land, nobody had used those fields for about 50 years. So they had scrubbed over.
They hadn't been used. And then the land to the side of him, that was a disused farm. And that had all just sat there for years, all untouched.
Largely, any animals, of whatever type of animals, they've just got the place undisturbed, haven't they? Even though there's noisy traffic and residential areas not far away, but it's a little haven.
Yeah, you've got the woods, you've got fresh running water, disused farm buildings, and untouched land. It's perfect.
All going on under our noses, yeah, right round the corner in the local countryside.
Yeah.
Since that horse attack, you've had one deer kill as well that you think is cat-related since, is that right?
Yeah, it was in the field. I pulled them in, and then when we went back down there to do an inspection, because the horses were out there, we went down to do an inspection, and it was gone. All you could make out was some drag marks in the grass and nothing.
Well, Paul needs to check his cameras, doesn't he? I don't think the cameras have been checked then since that, have they?
No, I don't. They haven't. I think he put them in just after the horse was attacked.
Okay, well I'll alert him to that. You could argue if that was the cat back, at least it did keep to a deer.
To be honest with you, the horses haven't been out since. There goes the hay bill.
Oh dear. Well, I'm sure everybody does feel for you, Sue, and thanks ever so much for telling us all what the reality of it's like at the sharp end, excuse the pun, of dealing with these cats when they are misbehaving.
It's just that they keep coming back. You expect for once, maybe twice, and then probably nothing, but it just keeps reoccurring. Just when you think, oh, right, it's moved on. Well, I actually thought, because we hadn't had anything for such a long time, I thought, well, perhaps it's dead, it's gone, that's the end of it. But obviously not. And now, obviously, we now know there's the mountain lion about as well. I got a map out and I was surprised how close to me that sighting was.
Yeah. It is the case when I keep in touch with other landowners and property owners and farmers and estates, that they never know what the interval is going to be between one event and the next. And sometimes it can be several years. I had it as much as 5 years, and nothing. And then, or sometimes it's 6 monthly, whatever, and you just don't know. And so you can sort of lose your sense of anticipation that something's going to happen. And then it does happen, just like the horse attack that you had when you thought it had gone quiet. So that, I think it may be that you will get an event like the development, the construction work that is proposed, and that does change it quite a bit.
That will change it considerably.
But then, of course, you've still got the big woodland around, haven't you, which will have the deer in?
Yes, yeah.
I think they don't like a lot of disturbance and construction for a while, so we'll try and up the cameras, because I really do hope we can get some better evidence. Very good of you to allow us to use, well, and the landowner, of course, that you deal with, to have cameras there. Just hope we can get something.
And he still says to me he's not convinced. He's not convinced it's a cat. I mean, how much more convincing does he need? He's already been confirmed by Essex Police that the deer have been killed by a cat. The horse has been attacked. What more do you want?
Yeah, he's not seeing it like you are, does he? Well, of course, he hasn't visually seen it. I mean, you've had several sightings and been close up.
I think it's because we're out dealing with the horses, You're out there sometimes late of a night. Well, we're out there quite a bit late of a night because there's so many to see to and that. And obviously it's quiet, and that's when you do see it.
But just shows you that on the very same property, somebody's lifestyle can be so different to yours, and they're just not exposed to nature and what's going on under their nose.
I know the lady next door. She was losing a load of fish. That was back in the summer, and she'd said to me, have you seen anything? But it was actually an otter, and I actually got my first glance of an otter out the front. I'd never seen one before.
Yeah, some of these cats do learn to come to ponds and lakes, and especially if somebody's got something like a koi carp pond.
Yeah, we used to see it by the pond where the carp are.
Yes,
it used to be there a lot.
Yes, but it could have been drinking as well, I suppose. It could have been both.
But it's those eyes.
I think I was saying when I first advised you that when you're out and feeling vulnerable in the evenings, have a heavy-duty, I'm sure you were anyway, but have a heavy-duty head torch or spotlights, and also use the strobe effect, because I think that they don't like those. And you've had 2 confrontations, close confrontations, where it's come up close.
Do not get out your car if there's been a power cut to unlock a gate. Definitely not. Make sure you've got your torch with you.
We'll finish with a quote you put on Facebook, I think. Something like, beautiful animal, but I hope it can F off somewhere else. I think we can quite understand that, Sue.
Yeah, I mean, they are beautiful, but it's the aggravation, It's now costing us a lot of money and a lot of inconvenience.
Do you think, Sue, that horse will eventually get slowly a bit better, a bit less stressed?
I don't know. The thing is, that they don't ever forget. I've got another horse who nothing to do with cats, but he had an injury as a youngster, and that was just coming out of a horse box. And even now, he's 22 years old, and even now he loads perfectly, but trying to get him out of the horse box, he's up there dancing about before he has to come down the ramp. They don't forget. But as I said, you can't approach her or come up from behind, because all she's doing is spinning round.
Oh dear.
But she's got the light on, so she's not in the dark now.
And she gets lots of love and attention and care from you and your daughter, of course.
Yeah, she's a lovely horse. She didn't deserve that. It sounds really terrible, really. I've got one horse that's a complete pain in the backside. It might have actually taught him a few manners if it had jumped on him. That sounds wicked.
Yeah, I'm sure we all know what you mean. Yeah, good stuff. We're all on a big learning journey with these cats in Britain, and cases like yours, you're part of that. I know it's a hassle. Thanks ever so much for all your time, Sue, and for coming on Big Cat Conversations. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for all that you've done, because you've been a really great help.
And it's been reassuring. It really has. Especially when, you tell people what's happening and they just look at you as if you're a complete lunatic.
Yeah, well, it is changing. With the Facebook groups now and a bigger support of people, it is changing a bit. I know that it's still frustrating because lots of people just don't know. I think a lot of people just don't know how stealthy and elusive and silent these animals are because they've never read one sentence about a leopard or a puma in a book. So they assume that they're going to be hassling people at every sort of field corner and very visible, but there's just far from it. So completely different to how people think.
When I reported the attack on the horse to Essex Police, it was as if he was like making fun, and he was quite patronising when I spoke to him. But they did actually give me a crime report number.
I've obviously got good contacts in some constabularies and some ex-police officers who have been in touch, and we'll have more on the podcast in time. So I think they all say that attitudes and awareness of this being real varies in constabularies depending on whether people have heard about it or not. So just like it would do anywhere else. It's a shame if you do get the wrong person who answers the phone, who is a bit doubtful or patronising or whatever. It's still changing and evolving in the police forces as well. Yeah, well, great, Sue. Thanks again for coming on the show. Really good to have your experience. And I'm sorry it's been so damned awkward for you over the years, but let's hope it does improve for yourself and the horses. So thanks again, Sue. All the best.
Hopefully. Thank you. Thank you very much.